BXB. It's in the game!
Anyone who saw me talk about Rimworld on the BXB Bits and Bobs podcast knows that I have strong feelings about this game. It would be an easy pick for my Game of the Year for 2016, although it's probably arguable whether it was actually released in that year. I mean, it is an early access title. Regardless, it's a game I really adore, partly because it's got this razor-sharp management game underneath it all, but mostly it's got this incredible capacity to generate unique, emergent, and really human stories. It even inspired me to start making a Let's Play series of it, and that was partly because I wanted to show people the deranged tales that were happening on my monitor day after day, but it was also because as long as I was going to be spending 12 hours a day playing a video game, I might as well try and build an internet presence off the back of it, right? But over the last month, my feelings towards the game have become a lot more complicated. I've been playing it long enough now that I've started to notice sort of quirks in the underlying simulation, and this has led me to start to wonder, are these quirks intentional or are they accidents? Am I seeing simple oversights in the design? Or is the design working as an expression of the creator's personal viewpoint on the world? One example of the kind of quirk I'm talking about is the way the current release, which at this point is Alpha 15, handles the gay trait. Now, colonists in Rimworld, they can have all sorts of different traits, and some of these are advantageous, like hard workers get tasks completed faster. Others are purely negative, like depressives take a permanent mood reduction because of their outlook. Now, these traits are great. They give your colonists a really individual personality, and generally speaking, I think this system works really well, but man, that gay trait is, it's a bit of a misstep. Basically, the issue is that being gay is a huge downside to a colonist. This is because colonists will attempt to form romantic relationships with each other, and in the simulation, the way this functions is that one colonist propositions another, and if the second party agrees, a relationship is formed. But if the second party doesn't agree, then the proposer takes a fairly moderate mood penalty, and it lasts for a few days. Now, if you've played Rimworld, you'll know that the entire game is basically managing your colonists' moods. So this penalty is a fairly significant thing, and it's that makes gay colonists such a liability. If you have a guy and he's literally the only gay in your village, they are doomed to have every romantic advance they make rebuffed, and this means that, somewhat ironically, gay colonists end up permanently depressed. They just bounce around from one rejection to the next, and they carry this constant -8 modifier to their mood the whole time. Now, where it gets really uncomfortable is in the player behaviour that this problem generates. Judging by the various advice threads you can find for the game online, most players have decided that they're better off having a no gays allowed policy in their colony. And in Rimworld, colonists are basically always recruited by saving them from dying, so the uncomfortable upshot of not recruiting gay colonists usually means you leave them to die in the wilderness instead. And that's not great, is it? Now, it's kind of interesting to me because none of the rules in this system seem particularly out of whack, and when you look at them in isolation, they all seem quite reasonable, but the consequence of when you put all these systems together is murderous homophobia? Ooh. Now, I should say this issue has been brought up to Tynan Sylvester, who is the developer of the game, a bunch of times, and he's on record as saying that this is not an intended thing, and he will be adding some kind of inbuilt gaydar to reduce the number of times gay colonists try to proposition their straight workmates, and to make it less frequent. Now, that's cool, I guess, but I can't shake this feeling that it won't make much of a difference. I mean, in Rimworld, relationships are really useful tools. They really boost colony mood, and if they lead to a marriage, everyone attends the wedding, and it's just good for everyone. And gay colonists will still be much less likely to obtain these benefits. It'd still be true to say that any gay colonist would still be a better colonist if they weren't gay. And so I still think players will think twice before recruiting homosexuals into their colony. As solutions go, I mean, this one just doesn't feel entirely satisfactory. This troubles me, for the same reason that some of the content in This Is the Police troubled me. It's a question of intent. Is it intentional that gay in Rimworld is a detrimental trait? I can't help but think back to the old arguments about gay soldiers and the constant refrain from opponents of that gays in the military would be bad for morale. Well, in Rimworld your colonists are your military, and so we're in a virtual world here where gay men are literally bad for morale. Now, after I fell in love with this game so utterly, I also started to follow Tynan on Twitter, and I read his design blog, and along with a few interviews with him and such forth. He pretty much single-handedly developed something that I thought was amazing, so I was interested to know more about him and get his outlook on game design and that sort of thing. Now, obviously, I don't want this video to become just a character assassination. I've never met Tinian, and I know someone's internet presence isn't often a good representation of what they're really like. But I do have to say that digging deeper into the individual behind the game, it didn't offer me the level of reassurance that I was really looking for. Like all real individuals, actually pinning down Tynan's politics is rather difficult. In some posts he comes across as a strong right-leaning libertarian, and then the next set of posts he'll be talking about the inequalities generated by capitalism, and he sounds like an outright Marxist. So I just don't know. Tynan was an outspoken defender of a game called #BlackLivesMatter, which is a tower defense game in which you must protect your police station from murderous hordes of Black Lives Matter protesters. The game was removed from Google Play and itch.io as both platforms considered it to be an act of hate speech, but Tynan felt that this in turn was an act of censorship, and he's tweeted in support of the developers several times. His argument is always purely a free speech argument, and as far as I can tell, he's never actually commented on the content of the game in question. So, I don't know. Tynan also gave a pretty long and detailed interview to Breitbart Tech last month, and that's fine, I guess. I mean, it's a publication with a large readership of very avid gamers, along with some other people. So I don't know. I know this is a lot of just like guilt by association, and it's probably completely unfair, but oh man, Breitbart? Really? Oh god. If you're looking for reassurance that someone you're interested in isn't a frothing outright crazy, man, that don't help. Now this all gets even more interesting because yesterday Rock Paper Shotgun ran a really interesting article about how gender is coded in Rimworld. They discovered from looking at the source that essentially all the female colonists have a non-zero chance of accepting the advances of another female, whereas male colonists who are not gay will never accept the advances of another man. Now this just muddies the waters for me even further. In Rimworld it turns out that women are either bisexual to some degree or outright lesbians. Women are never straight, and men are never bisexual. Now, does that arrangement ring any bells? Like it should do, because that is the sexuality spectrum as seen in porn. All the ladies are open to a little bit of lesin, but the men will never play that way. Oh man, I still don't really know what I think about all of this, and I'd hoped that making this video would lead me to some sort of conclusion, but that just hasn't happened. On the one hand, I do think video games like Rimworld, they are simulations of the real world, and as such, they do have to inevitably simplify their subject matter. The reality of human sexuality and romantic interactions is complex far beyond the reach of any algorithmic system, and so issues like this, to some extent, they are inevitable. I really want games to continue to explore this kind of topic, but if a burning torch brigade is going to form around every representation of human relationships that doesn't precisely mirror every aspect of them in the real world, developers will just shy away from ever attempting to touch these topics, because it's just going to be inviting trouble for them. Now, I had my own small experience of this rocky terrain during the development of Networm. I was at a trade show and I was very directly challenged by a young woman to explain to her why there were no female characters in my game. And she was absolutely correct. There are no women in Networm. And worse, perhaps, this was an explicit decision that I had taken during development. I had decided that every character in my game was going to be an awful person, and awful in a very specific way. Each character is essentially an embodiment of the evils of unfettered capitalism. I've got like a rich exploitative tech boss in there, and he's got this hateful trust fund son, and there's a greedy chief of police who only ever serves corporate interests and he's been paid off all the time. Like, every character in the game is corrupted by the power of the free market. And once I'd decided that that was going to be my tone, I just couldn't think of a way to write a female character who didn't end up becoming some awful misogynistic caricature of a powerful woman. I didn't want to play up to that business bitch trope, and the theme of the game meant I couldn't have innocents who were being caught in the crossfire because the player is essentially on a crime spree. So I took the decision that there were going to be no women in my game. Now, was that the right decision? I don't know. I mean, certainly my interrogator on the day was seriously unimpressed with my response. But I still think I acted with good intentions, even though the consequence of that was to strip 50% of the population out of my world. Maybe the benefit of the doubt should be offered to a developer of a product if it seems to be making a political faux pas. I mean, you just don't know the reasons people have made the decisions they've made. On the other hand, developers do get to choose the simplifications they make in their simulations, and I do think that when you look at games made by individuals or small groups, it is inevitable that their personal feelings on the topic will leak through into the product, however hard they might try to prevent it. Now, do I think Tynan wanted his players to murder gay people on sight? No, of course not. But do I think the decisions he's made in how to simulate human relationships reveal a lot about how he thinks they operate? Yeah, I do. Or at least, I think it reveals what he thinks his players are comfortable with. I mean, a sapphic fling here and there is exciting and exotic, right? But two dudes going to bed with each other, well, if your target market is Breitbart readers, best not, eh?